If anything in F1 proves that a year can make such a difference, it has got to be Aston Martin. At the beginning of 2023, Fernando Alonso was running at the front, scoring 6 podiums in the first 8 races. And with Ferrari and McLaren in such disarray, Aston Martin, or more accurately Fernando Alonso, looked like he could be the only force to challenge Red Bull and Max Verstappen. Fast forward 12 and a bit months, and the situation over at Aston starts to look very different. The team is yet to see any sort of trophy this season, and now seems to be slipping further and further behind Mercedes, who are on a sort of rebuild for their season. And rather worryingly, Fernando Alonso, who's supposed to be the spearhead of the team, just seems lost right now. And I wonder, is he getting to the beginning of that cycle he does where he does his sort of Fernando Alonso thing? Either way, something is wrong and he clearly isn't happy. And then you have Lance Stroll, who, despite being massively unaware of the world around him, has scored most of the team's points since Spain. Sure, he's been announced for 2025, which surprised nobody, but the feeling still remains that he's in a seat that someone else could put to far better use. So these are very odd, perplexing, and strangely grim times for Aston Martin. It's looking more and more like they're not able to haul themselves out of this slump and put some sort of challenge towards Mercedes, who right now seem to be leaving them behind. With their last round of updates being ineffective and nothing really serious cooking away for the current car, you've got to ask yourself, what the hell is going on? How has Aston Martin, with all their budget, facilities and backing, sunk back like this? Well, I think I might just have the answer. But before we jump in, please click that little subscribe button below. It's great when you do, and it really helps the channel. So before we get into the nuts and bolts on what the hell Aston Martin are up to, I thought it would be good to give a little sit rep on the perception of the team so far. Of course, this is my opinion, but I'd love to hear yours. Why not let me know in the comments? So in my eyes, Aston Martin seemed like a sort of team where, for all their straight up new facilities, state-of-the-art facilities, big budgets, big sponsors, backing, everything, having Alonso as a driver, I struggle to commit to these guys. In time, I guess one of their goals is to become one of these F1 institutions like Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes and McLaren. And this is where the problem is, because I would never expect any of those teams to sell up, change their name or rebrand to something different entirely. As a fan, then leaving your prior investment of time, emotion and money just obsolete. And because of that, you commit to these teams, you lean on them, you support them, you buy their merch, you invest your time. Right now, if I woke up one morning and there was breaking news that Aston Martin F1 team had been rebranded as Aramco Formula 1, I would not be surprised in the slightest. Combining that with Lance Stroll's continuous drive thanks to Daddy Stroll, I do struggle to take this team seriously and one that I can really hang my hat on. Having a serious driver like Alonso or Vettel and then Stroll, who could never stand on his own 2 feet in the other, you question, are they taking this seriously? This team just seems like a joke. But supporting the team alone despite its drivers is something I have serious trouble doing. And I really want to, because somewhere underneath that green paint is yellow paint, DNA from Jordan, my childhood team. And someone else I'm sure having trouble taking the team seriously right now must be Fernando Alonso. He must have been promised all these great things and he bought into their plans for F1 success. And yeah, this yielded results early on, but now that this team is in this slump, I sense he is getting fed up with all the talk of we're working on this and that upgrade and all that sort of stuff. Now, we've seen before with Alonso when performance drops off and the team doesn't have the answer, he goes inside himself, and when he stops enjoying himself, that's when we start to get that dark, unpredictable Alonso, which we saw at McLaren and at times at Alpine. Perhaps he's fed up with the politics inside the team and what he's obliged to do and say because he has to face the Lance and Lawrence Stroll dynamic head on. And Alonso has had a lot of teammates over the years, but I've never seen him be as supportive or kind or complimentary with any of them as he has been with Stroll. And I sense what he's putting out there must be very different to what he's muttering under his breath or saying behind closed doors. Now, something else which could be a possibility, and I'm sure this would be bothering Fernando, is has the team now decided to point the majority of their time, money and efforts to 2026 where the new regulations come in, therefore sacrificing 2025 and the second half of 2024. Now, Fernando is not a driver who's blessed with time, although he may be fitter, more focused and confident than ever. Scraping into the points at every single race isn't exactly what he had in mind when he signed up. But when he first arrived, he got exactly what he signed up for. He was knocking out podium places, he had a Mercedes engine in the back, a state-of-the-art factory, and Lawrence was treating him like his adopted son. It looked like Fernando had finally got a good deal. Only when you look at it now, and whether my thoughts are the case or not, the fact is, we have a visibly unsatisfied Alonso. But despite the team having made moves to increase performance, such as these new Honda power units and rumours around Adrian Newey coming on board, there is still a team that appears lost. They seem to be very comfortable with their long-term plans, they just seem to be struggling with who they are right here, right now. So the team is trying to move up a level by becoming the Honda Works team and being independent and finally free from the clutches of Mercedes. They can operate independently and everything, which is great, but Alonso has worked with Honda before and he didn't really have some kind words to say about them. Now you can argue that's because of the failed cooperation between McLaren and Honda, and I'm sure Aston will want to approach them very, very differently. Now Honda has absolutely flourished working with Red Bull, so it's going to be very interesting to see how this Aston-Honda relationship does play out. Now the Honda thing is very interesting because I'm sure one thing that they will demand is having a Japanese driver in one of the seats. Or more accurately, Yuki Tsunoda. And when you consider that possibility, Lance Stroll's contract extension for next year does start to make more sense. So I think that as soon as the Honda partnership with Aston was announced, part of the terms of this was having a Japanese driver in one of the seats. That was it, and it was signed at the time. This isn't being disrespectful or nasty to Honda, but this is something they have insisted on in the past, and it's to do with their marketing and domestic brand perception. Back in the day, Honda insisted that Takuma Sato be in a Jordan or BAR seat whilst they were receiving Honda engines, despite there being much better drivers available. And what did Honda do when Sato didn't have a seat? Well, they just helped start their own one with an all-Japanese lineup. The infamous Super Aguri. Yuki Tsunoda is a full-on Honda-backed driver and they will not want him competing against their own works team. So the result of this, Yuki to Aston for 2026, I sense is almost a certainty. The contract will just be a formality, Honda will want this, they've done this sort of thing in the past and I don't see why they will want to change now. After all, it has to be getting more and more difficult for Lawrence to justify to all the sponsors and shareholders and backers that having his son Lance in one of the seats is the best option. By having Lance there, they have definitely cut themselves short on track and they potentially could also be suffering in terms of things like marketability and merchandise sales. By the way, if you have bought any Lance Stroll merchandise, please leave a comment below. Which means Lance Stroll will continue for 2025 in what will be some sort of a bridging season towards the total fresh start of Aston Martin Honda in 2026. After all, what competent driver would want to go into Aston Martin given their current performance for just one season? Anyone who would, I think, wouldn't be a massive upgrade over Lance anyway. So Lance stays for 2025, which will be his final year, in which he moves on then to compete in another series under the Aston Martin name. Now this is where it gets really interesting. So Aston Martin announced that their hypercar, the Valkyrie, will be competing at the 2025 Le Mans 24 Hours and will most likely be doing this in the years following. And who designed the Valkyrie? None other than Adrian Newey. So it's on the back of this that makes me think that Adrian Newey will sign for Aston Martin. Aston Martin get to reap all the benefits of having him on board. Meanwhile, he will be reunited with his Valkyrie project where he can update and improve for Le Mans and have new versions of this road car. This could also be the way that he eventually rides off into the sunset. F1 by day, Valkyrie by night, and eventually switching them over. So much to Alonso's frustration, I sense that this is exactly what Aston Martin are working towards right now, sacrificing the 2024 and 25 seasons. To which we will eventually see a lineup of Alonso and Tsunoda in an Aston Martin Honda in a car designed by Adrian Newey. A very formidable lineup which could realise Lawrence Stroll's ambitions. But not just for Alonso, it's everyone else in the team, top to bottom. It's got to be the waiting that is killing them. The whole team could very well have been told behind closed doors that 2026 is the priority. And that next season's car will probably just be an evolution of the current one. Now for Lance, he probably doesn't mind, he was probably watching Wimbledon instead, and either way for him it probably won't even make that much difference. But for Alonso, it's just another 2 years thrown away. He'll be 44 by the start of 2026 and in the final year of his contract, so he's probably going to be wondering where his future lies. To me though, this seems like the best explanation I can think of for a team that has actually quite exciting prospects for the future, but just looks so lost right now, sliding down the order and being challenged by lesser teams with no reply. Like I said, they can probably afford to finish mid-table this season and next, but it's 2026 that they really need to start coming up with answers. And they've made some considerable new hires recently, key staff members from other teams, so they've really bought into the plan and what they've been told for the future. The 2026 regulations really could shake up the order, and Aston could see this as their best shot for success, rather than just plugging away as they are for the next 2 years, which could achieve nothing. So the long and short of it now is I sense that Aston are sacrificing their short term in the hope of success in 2026 and onwards. It sounds promising if you're a shareholder, but if you're Fernando Alonso, you're probably going to feel a little bit betrayed, and also that you don't believe what you hear anymore, much like the rest of us when it comes to Aston Martin. Anyway, do let me know what you think in the comments, guys. Will Tsunoda drive for Aston Martin? Will Adrian Newey go to Aston Martin? Let me know below. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Give the video a like if you enjoyed it, and as always, I'm Paul, and I'll see you later. Cheers.